Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Journalism gives you the opportunity of meeting, spending time with, of learning about the most fascinating, interesting people anywhere. One of those was Kanwarpal Singh Gill, or KPS Gill, as he was popularly known as. Now, KPS Gill, 26th of May, this day, died in 2017. You would know, if you've been following my writings, that quite often I write about the lives of interesting people who've dominated our times. KPS Gill was surely one of them. This was a national interest written when he died, and then we did not give you video and audio version of national interest. So as and when possible, I now try to fill that gap, and this is one more in the same series. So this was my tribute to KPS Gill. In his afterlife, as in his life, Kanwarpal Singh, or KPS Gill, continues to challenge your learning and established notions. For example, the first principle of obituary in any journalism school: never be chronological. I don't know how to keep that writing about Mr. Gill, or Gill Saab as we would call him, because my first meeting with him is an abiding memory. So how do I avoid that chronology trap? It was in early 1981, 43 years ago, when I had just come to cover the Northeast, that mostly and aptly described as being in flames. He wasn't DG Assam Police yet, just an IG, but in charge of law and order. It was at his old style Assam-type bungalow along the Brahmaputra. "So you are Shekhar Gupta?" He, in uniform, looked up from his desk, sort of sizing me up and giving me the look that I still am not able to decipher as curious or mocking. "बैठिए आप," he said. "सुना है बहुत घूमते हैं आप अपनी Enfield bike पर. Please take a seat. I believe you really get around it on your Enfield motorbike." Before I could even settle down came the question with that wicked Gill stare that I was to get used to over the next 36 years. "License hai?" For a second, I was foxed. And then he laughed with obvious gotcha, as our careers ran parallel between troubled Assam and Punjab. Never mind that the year I was born, 1957, is when he passed his IPS examinations and joined the Assam cadre. He was always the youngest and fittest amongst us, and God knows I haven't seen anybody else handle his alcohol as he could, and as much alcohol as he could. After he retired in 1995, it became more like a personal friendship. We often said good things to each other and also fought over his leadership, in my view hijacked, of the Indian Hockey Federation, as I thought his method was destroying the game in India. Hockey has done much better after he lost control. But even when we met just 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks before his passing away, to record a walk the talk for NDTV, for his last interview, he upbraided me for writing that our hockey was now having a resurgence after he had lost control. And we fought another friendly, sporty fight. There were legends about him in Assam in the 80s. Some good, many bad. He was charged with kicking to death Khargeshwar Talukdar, an Assam agitator, and later acquitted by the Delhi High Court, where the case was shifted as no lawyers or witnesses would come forward in the highly charged Assam of those years. Over time, though, I discovered one key aspect of the KPS legend. He never personally used violence on anybody, never carried a firearm. Nothing ever more than his swagger stick. That's all he was armed with when we got our closest look at his calm fearlessness as well as his art of crisis management. In the catastrophic Assam elections of February 1983, an ethnic massacre was reported in the subdivision of Mangaldoi, about 70 kilometers away from Guwahati, across the Brahmaputra. He was leading a review with the Army's GOC, Major General Division Commander from Rangia, and I, along with fellow reporter Seema Guha, landed up defying that blockaded highway on the same Enfield. The sun sets early in Assam, and by the time the meeting finished, it was dusk. It was still winter. The GOC and Gill departed with their escorts for Guwahati, and we followed until we were halted on the banks of a Himalayan river because the wooden bridge over it had been set on fire by the agitators. Outlines of a noisy mob became apparent in the dust on the other bank, their spears and swords gleaming in the setting sun. The general was furious for having such a small escort. Gill was calm, asking his troops and the generals to take defensive positions, also cite their only LMG, light machine gun. He only had the swagger stick. Scared, I asked what the problem was. He smiled. Again, I can't say if he was casual or mocking, and said, "The problem is that you people are here." He refused to elaborate. That adventure ended in a grossly understated drama. Complete anticlimax. Gill looked at the smoking bridge closely, climbed into his jeep, asked his driver to go for it. They crossed it safely. The rest of us followed one by one. The general first, we last. Basically, by going first, he had shown all of us that the bridge was quite safe to drive over. We assembled later that evening at Gill's home to exchange notes over his usual old monk rum. But he still wouldn't tell me why he said our presence was the problem. He said, "I will tell you at the right time." He told me much later when he was posted as CRPF IG in Punjab and we met at the Amritsar Circuit House. And he said, and I quote, "I had an armed mob of thousands coming at us. All we had were about 7 rifles and 1 LMG. If we had to open fire, killing scores or maybe even more, do you think I really wanted to have 2 reporters watching?" That was the problem. And yet again, just a couple of weeks before he passed away, when we met for our walk the talk, in fact, his last interview, as I mentioned earlier, he was critical of the way the CRPF was handling stone pelters in Kashmir. And I quote, "You can't fire at mobs who are throwing stones at you." And he went on to add that one has to think innovatively, even defensively sometimes. You can agree or argue, but the conventional method was never for him. For KPS Gill to say you don't have to fire at stone throwers, mere stone throwers, sometimes you have to also think defensively. That's the reason I say the conventional method was never for him. His critics accuse him of killing Sikhs indiscriminately. That wasn't Gill's style. In fact, he succeeded in that final battle in 1991-94 because he spared and used the foot soldiers, helped them take new identities and settle, often in trucking businesses in distant states with new identities, Chhattisgarh, Manipur, anywhere far away from Punjab. But only as long as they helped his boys catch their commanders. His police listed terrorists in categories A to D. He had then often said to me, on the record published in India Today, that once a terrorist is convinced he won't survive more than 6 months after making it to our A category, terrorism will end. As it did. A little side story to that period is that between 1984 and 1995, Gill had 4 comings in Punjab. Each time he was moved away when politicians, by now in deep nexus with terrorists, found him inconvenient. In 1988, Operation Black Thunder, where NSD's Black Cats made their first appearance, led by him and set up brilliantly by Ajit Doval, was a spectacular success. A key feature, unlike Operation Blue Star earlier, was that rather than banish the media, he allowed us, nearly 100 at one point, to watch the entire action. You could even sit for hours next to the NSD snipers watching them pick out terrorists one at a time, over 3 full days. As soon as VP Singh's coalition, which was close to the Akalis, replaced Rajiv Gandhi's government in New Delhi, Gill was moved out, only to be brought back again by PV Narasimha Rao in 1992 as terrorism returned in its most virulent form yet in Punjab. Khalistani bands ruled the state. Even we reporters had the ignominy of being stopped in border districts at armed terrorists' checkpoints at night, hoping to talk our way out of trouble. The war was utterly one-sided by 1992, when the year's toll was at least 5,000, several hundreds of them policemen, in an exodus reminiscent of the Kashmiri Pandits 2 years earlier, except it was much bigger. Millions of Hindu families, as well as prosperous Sikhs, were moving out of Punjab. By 1993, however, the balance had reversed. Unlike his times in distant Assam, his Punjab years are also better documented. His essential doctrine was only the local police can fight terror, army, central forces can help, but you can't win in Punjab unless good Jats fight bad Jats, and my police is mostly Jat Sikh, he said. He motivated them. The Rao government, through Rajesh Pilot, then Minister of State for Internal Security, kept resources on tap. Gill resettled hundreds of sources and assets and also saved up some money for the legal defense of his key officers, who he knew would face human rights cases later. He taught us the condom theory. देखो भाई, We are as useful to the government as condoms, tossed once the job is over, he would say. He personally got into serious trouble as he was charged and convicted under Section 354 IPC, which is outraging the modesty of a woman, for inappropriate behavior with an IAS officer at a drunken party in Chandigarh. Finally, the Supreme Court was forgiving with him, reducing his sentence to a fine, probation, and a commitment not to drink at parties. Did he keep that commitment? All I'd say is, if I was asked that question in a court under oath, I would be in real trouble. I would have had a real dilemma. But then I would recall Gill's invocation the first time he talked me into serious drinking. All your doubts, fears, dilemmas will vanish once you say your favorite prayer and take a sip of Buddha Sant. That last you would have figured was Gill speak for old mantra.